Welcome to our first official Support Women in Tech panel at JNUC. Yay! We're really excited about today's panel. We'll let each panelist introduce themselves. We'll do about 45 minutes of a panel discussion. We have a few great questions to kick it off, but if you do come up with a question, feel free to head over to one of the microphones if you want to get involved in the discussion. And then at the end of today's panel, we've got some great refreshments, snacks, and a few beverages from our great sponsors. And with that, I will kick it over to our moderator, Liz, to start.
Great. Thanks, Jen. Hey, everybody. So I'm Liz Tupper. I'm Director of Product Strategy at a local Minneapolis company called Software for Good. It's not just a clever name. We build software for good, so impactful software that's hoping to change the world. And I've been working in technology for almost 2 decades. I started my career as a front-end developer. I'm really excited to be here. And with that said, I think we'll start with just quick introductions from everyone here, and then we'll dive into some questions.
Okay, good afternoon. My name is Beth Cheetah. I'm Vice President of Engineering here at Jamf.
I am Luis Radifera. I manage the Apple and mobile space at CBS.
My name is Jeff Lynn. I'm the founder and CEO of a company called Bust Out Solutions. We're a software company based in Minneapolis.
Great. Thanks, everyone. And actually, before we get started with questions, I always like to set the stage with a story. And when I was thinking about what type of story to talk about, how it feels like to be a woman in tech, I wanted to take a step back and talk about how it feels like to be a person in a situation where you don't feel like you're included. And as I was thinking about this, I have this, what now was a great experience, but at the time didn't feel so awesome. It was the first time that I was in Washington, D.C., and I was there for a conference. And I felt super awesome because I was walking around in this amazing beige coat and quickly realized that everyone in DC wears black. And so I was walking around, I was feeling all confident, and then all of a sudden I became like super insecure and felt like I didn't belong there. And I was like, everyone can tell I'm a tourist. And it really changed the way I was behaving and how I felt. And that is what it's like to feel like a person who is marginalized anywhere. You're walking into a space and you feel like you instantly don't belong here, and it can change how you interact in that space. So that sort of sets the stage of what, over my career, sometimes it's felt like being a woman in technology. I do have a follow-up to this story at the end that I'll share. There's actually a silver lining to this story and how you all can play a part in making things better. That's my beige coat story. So I've got some questions we've prepared, but feel free, if you all have questions, we have mics up at the front. We'd love to hear your questions as well. So, to get things started, I'd love to talk about how each of you maybe started your career, and if it started in tech or if it started in a non-traditional tech role, and how that came to be for each of you.
I can start. I definitely did not take a traditional path to where I am now. My first role out of school was running a call center. And it was there that I had the ability to bring in a piece of technology, which was advanced at the time, not so advanced anymore, and I fell in love with the idea of technology driving business and the intersection of people, process, and technology. So I found a job, this was within financial services, where they would train you to learn how to program on systems that the technologies were so old they weren't teaching them in school. So old school stuff. And I did that for a while. I did some development, learned a few languages. After that, we were acquired by a very large company. I moved into leadership and spent my time there pretty much on the leadership side. I've kind of said I'm not someone that goes home and codes over the weekend because I'm not particularly good at it, but I have fallen in love with the idea of how technology drives business. And so I've had the opportunity to work at large companies, different companies across pretty much every kind of technology you can imagine. And if I were to go backwards, I maybe would have gone into computer engineering, but when I was in college, I never even thought of it. I had a business degree. that's how I ended up where I am.
Cool. What about you, Louise?
I mean, I would say mine is both yes and no. I didn't go to school for computer science. I'm a lapsed poli-sci history major. I thought the foreign service or law would be really, really awesome. But then I got a job opportunity. A friend's like, well, you've been playing with computers since grade school. I have a job opening. Why don't you go take it? So I said yes. And then everything's been more or less traditional. Help desk, pick up the phone. Have you turned it off? Have you turned it on? Eventually, moving on to the back end of servers. Like, ooh, I can turn off the network. I can turn on the network. I can allow mail flow. So, moving on to the back end systems, bouncing between various industries. And then finally at CBS, I went to the dark side, management.
I'm a molecular biologist that took a wrong turn about 20 years ago and have been in tech since then. I was on my way to graduate school to do a PhD in molecular biology, and my sister convinced me to take a year off between undergrad and graduate school and just have fun and relax. And so I found a job as a software developer here in Minneapolis, just down the street at Retech. And I was in the height of the dot-com boom, so it was like a party every day. Ended up not going to grad school, and here I am running a software company.
Cool. It sounds like all of you, and I have a little similar story of this too, where I haphazardly ended up in tech just because I knew how to I self-taught myself how to build websites, but I went to school to become an architect. And I feel like that story is pretty common amongst different people. And knowing that you have all these different backgrounds, I'd love to talk a little bit more about how those backgrounds and either that lack of experience in tech or that experience in other areas has impacted your role and how you see your role today and how you do your work.
I think when I look back, I think I was, for a long time, I was intimidated by the idea that I did not have a software engineering degree, but I'm a voracious learner. And somewhere along the way, I got comfortable with being comfortable with what I don't know and being okay with asking questions and learning where I need to. And I think it was a transformation for me. I don't know when, but I'm just a question asker. So I've had a couple different times. I had a couple jobs ago where they needed to start a new mobile center of excellence. I had never built an app. I didn't know how to do it. I didn't know how I was going to do it, but I knew I could find the right people, and I knew we could figure it out. And I love that kind of work, and it suits well for technology, because the technology is always changing. So, but it was a process for me to get comfortable with it.
I don't think it really affected me so much. I was a tomboy growing up, so the guys are just always like, okay, you broke it, fix it. And it was the same thing with tech. Once I fell into tech, my manager was really good. He would spend time with us saying, this is a command prompt. This is the command you don't do. This is what you do. If I didn't know, I would just go to someone else and say, so how do I restart the computer? And that's how you learned. And being on the help desk, but then I would go to the network team going, it's down, it's broken, how do I fix it? You get the admin password, you go in, you fix it, you close the tickets. So I never really felt that I had any of the challenges, but also being a poli-sci major, it's just a matter of reading books. Mm-hmm. So, you get a stack of manuals, you go through it, and then you terrify your manager when you can quote the index page where you have an answer for something.
I think my background is both why I'm here, and I went to a small liberal arts college here in Minnesota called Carleton College, where you learn a little bit about everything and a lot about nothing. And software was, to me, a lot like science. Since I was going down the path of becoming a scientist, it was, well, here's a problem, let's try something, see if it works. If that doesn't work, try something else, and you experiment. And not having a traditional tech background, I've built my team. We're a custom software design and development shop. I've built my team in very much the same way of like people who have kind of figured out how to solve problems. Actually, very few of the people on my team are academically trained in computer science. There are people like me who were doing things in life and then kind of took an interest in computer science and software development and ended up making it a career. So we're a very mixed up team, and to answer a question that might be on your mind, like what's this guy doing on a panel about supporting women? Liz asked me to join the panel. I have a team that is a fairly diverse team, both in terms of gender and race and age, not by design. Like I didn't seek people to make a diverse team for whatever politically correct reasons. I picked people to be on a team that I thought would work well together and that would challenge each other and have different perspectives, which we can get into in a little bit.
So Beth, I want to touch on something that you talked about, and it piggybacks into some data and research that shows that, in general, women tend to look at resumes as a checklist, and if they don't meet all the requirements, they think they're maybe not qualified for the job. So I'd love to hear from you, maybe and you talked a little bit about it when you talked about, how you applied your background, but how women can reach for roles and responsibilities that they may not feel like they're qualified for, at least on paper.
Well, I'm 60 days on the job here. And I can say that I had been following JAMP because I thought it was a very interesting company, and I wanted to be with a company that was had good values and was based in the Midwest, so it had all of the makings of what I was looking for. And I sat there looking at it, and I thought, I don't know if I can do this job. I don't know if I didn't have all the qualifications that were listed. And I thought, I'm gonna put my name out there. I've managed very large companies. I've got a lot of great experience, and I just kind of went for it. And I don't know if it was that day or I was not on the street looking for a job. It was the right time at the right place. But I decided I was going to jump in. And I know that I know I've made a great choice. And I know that at JAMP, we're looking at how do you attract the right candidates? How do we look at how job descriptions are written so they're more inclusive? And I think that's one of the takeaways. I think 5 years before, maybe I wouldn't have even applied. But I decided, I'm going to try it. I'll either learn that where I am is the place I should be. I'll gain something from the experience. I'll network, and here I am.
Awesome.
So I'm glad I did.
Well, what's the worst that's going to happen? They're just not going to call
Get
you back,
rejected and
right?
feel terrible about yourself. But
Right.
that's okay. It's all part of the learning experience. It's okay.
Louise, you were talked about a lot about having a really supportive manager.
Yes.
I'd love to hear how, from your perspective, I think having a super supportive manager can make or break a lot of people's careers. As managers in the audience or even just really good team members, how in your mind people feel like they can be really good advocates for other just team members in general?
My manager I'll just give the example of being supported. A few months ago, I had an opening on my team, and I needed to write a job description. Being around guys in IT, I basically created a checklist of, I want this, you need this year's experience, you need this education, this, a checklist. My manager said, no, that's not how you do it. You need to be more inclusive, more neutral. I didn't listen to him. I'm like, no. So we had a conversation late one night. I'm like, no, I'm not going to do this. And the supporting part was, he said, okay, fine, do it your way. But then I thought about it, and I ran it by several people in some of the Mac admin Slack channels. And I got a lot of feedback. I got some very good feedback. One of the best pieces of feedback was one of the women that I know. She's brilliant, great at scripting, and the first line she said, I don't have those years of experience. I don't have that education level. I am not going to apply. That was a slap in the face. I'm like, but you're qualified. So we went a little bit back and forth on it, and then I realized after getting some more feedback about verbiage and description, yeah, okay, now I understand it. Now I see it. Now I see where my manager was going about being more inclusive. It's how you reach out for the jobs and how you present it and where you go. I rewrote the job description and it was much better. So I would say the allies sometimes know better than we do. I've adapted to the male way of working and thinking. And that's part of the problem, is that I'm looking for more women diversity. I'm automatically turning them off with my job descriptions. So allies have if they understand, you should listen to the allies because they're trying to help you move forward. Listen to them, take it to heart, and then absorb it and modify what you have to say.
Great.
And speaking of allies,
So my company is pretty different than CBS and JAMP. We're a small team, so small teams tend to operate a little bit differently. We're just under 20 people. We have 18 people on staff. And hiring at Bust Out is we kind of have our checklist is two items. No assholes, no dumbasses. That always gets a laugh, but think about it. If you satisfy those two rules, you got a good candidate no matter what. And we have, so on our team of 17, 18 people, we've got 5 women that touch everything from management to operations, engineering, design, customer service. We all wear multiple hats on a small team anyways. We've got Asian, Black, Latino, white, men, women, 3 religions, 4 generations, all packed in this 18-person team. And I've actually been, I've been in conversations with colleagues in the industry who look at my team and they say, at what level were you okay with dropping your standards to build a diverse team? And I know, you'd be surprised how many people think that is a normal question. But the truth is, we don't drop standards. We're a small elite team. I have probably ridiculously high standards for people who join the team. With 18 people, we've actually had upwards of 90 people on payroll at some point in the last 14 years. And we bring them in as contractors, contract to hire kind of thing. Pretty normal practice for a small company, for any company really. But we're extremely selective, so people come in on contract, and if they're, we thank them for the project and don't bring them back. So the people on team have really gone through the ringer. And so I take offense to that comment all the time when they say, we have a more diverse software team than a lot of companies. Granted, it's a small team, but still, there's nothing about dropping standards.
Yeah, and when we chatted about a week and a half ago before we got on this panel, and I was sharing with Jeff a similar story that happened with my CEO. And I think the big thing to point out is if you come across a person who's not traditionally or hasn't historically been represented in tech, whether it's race, gender, what have you, if they're still there, they're probably a powerhouse. And so it's really rare that I've come across someone who fits that profile that doesn't deserve to be there or hasn't already proven their worth to be there. So those types of comments, per Jeff's reaction, I find just really appalling and totally inaccurate. Totally inaccurate. I'd love to talk a little bit, and we talked about this as a group on our call. Just the importance as we're building and developing products to have the right people, all these different diverse perspectives at the table. And that's why it's important that we not only have women as part of the discussion, but anyone who's not currently a part of the discussion as well. I'd love to hear, I'm going to put you on the spot since you're new at JAMP, what your plans are for hiring and looking for those types of people and those unique voices and perspectives.
Well, I am new to JAMP, but I can say that what I like about the culture of JAMP, and I'm up here, so I'm being asked to kind of give back and figure out how do we look at first inclusion, and when you have inclusion, you naturally start to build your diversity around that. And so we're actively looking at that, and I think, we're looking at even bringing in some AI technology around job descriptions, a product called Textio that helps you look at what you're writing in your requirements and maybe other ways of attracting diverse candidates. And for me personally, I want to find the best people for the roles, and there's kind of a theme I think I'm hearing. And this morning, the person from Ohio State said there were 50,000 engineers, but 500,000 opportunities. And people come with different backgrounds and thinking about what you need, what are the skills you need, and thinking about that a little differently and how you want to cultivate and access those people are things that I'm going to work on and continue to work on. Because although I'm a woman in tech and I've had a successful career, I don't know that I've stepped back and really think about that. So that's my plan. That's awesome.
I got to be very careful on how I phrase this. It is something that we are looking at. Because I helped start the Women in Tech group at CBS, it is something that, in working with our HR department, we're very passionate about. So, we're looking at how we can transform our diversity and inclusion, and then all the plans. Starting off with the job description that I had to redo. It's where do we go? What is our outreach? Where do we post the jobs? Do we go out to events? Do we go, wherever we go? And in a large corporation, this is something that takes time to change. But so long as you have advocates there, you can make the cultural changes you can make the cultural changes. So, yeah.
I think there has to be a fundamental belief that a diverse team is a better team. You start with that belief, and then everything else just kind of makes sense. Like, I'm a big music fan of all different kinds of music, and I always think, like, if I were to start a band, would I hire 5 drummers? That'd actually be, they might be the best drummers in the world, but then you just got a crap band. If you want the best band possible, you need 5, guitar, drums, piano, sax, whatever. And I think teams of any kind, whether it be a software team, a band, a sports team, families, everything, whenever you get a group of people together that has a mission or a task or a problem to solve, just different minds melding together ultimately leads to a better solution. The path to that solution might be bumpier and rockier because maybe you don't get along with people who are different than you, but ultimately different perspectives lead to better solutions.
Totally. And it doesn't, to your point, Jeff, it doesn't mean that those initial conversations are always easy or comfortable, but they're the conversations that need to be had to make better work output at the end of the day. So, sorry. Sometimes, we talked about this too as a group, and I talked about this specifically because there's definitely been times in my career where either I was the only woman in the company, or the only woman on the team, or the only woman in the meeting. And sometimes it helps to just have that one other woman there, just to have a person who can validate your ideas or speak up and be like, yeah, well, Liz says that was amazing. And at times in my career, I've had to really step up and make myself stand out in different ways. And I'd love to hear how maybe each of you have done that, if that was something that you felt you needed to do, and how that worked for you.
Well, I like to wear orange. That helps. I don't know. Stand out, I'm not sure how to answer that. I would say I've always looked for mentors. I've looked for people that I think I can learn from, that will give me candid feedback, and that will help me figure out how to be successful in whatever it is I'm trying to achieve, which usually comes down to to relationships and understanding, just understanding where you're at personally and professionally. That'd probably be how I would answer. I think standing out is listening and getting feedback about yourself, and that is done, when mentors, and I don't mean through formal mentor programs. I've been those. I mean, there's plenty of mentors that you can find at all levels that you can learn from, and that's something I've always tried to do, and I think that helps.
Mine's basically more or less simple. Don't be a wallflower. If you see something, go for it. The worst that's going to happen is they're going to say no. I'll give an example of how I got jammed within my company. We had standing every quarter, all manager meetings to give the state of our department. I just went through a reorganization. My director was not available. There was no one else on the team who was doing the presentation. I decided, okay, it's incumbent on me to do it. I had the most junior title there, and I was going up with VPs and directors and presenting. That alone got the attention of senior management. But then, also not being about a wallflower, I had to present the state of management of the company. It was a little bit of a wild, wild west. Most people will then shrink at the questions. I didn't. My director asked some questions, very candid, and I gave him very blunt answers. His face got a little redder than my jacket. Every director was then going, what are you doing? I kept going and going and going. The follow-up to that was a week later, I gave him a call. I said, well, we're entering budget season. I need this. My director, who's not here, told me we had to analyze. We know JAM fits a platinum standard. What do we have to do? He remembered the presentation and the fact that I did it for an entire new organization, stood up there, answered his questions, and then I had the audacity to call him and say, I want to spend several million of your dollars. A few months later, we signed the check. So it's very hard to go up and be aggressive. It's not always in our nature to do it. But we always see guys talking over women or just saying, hey, this is my idea, and they're seen as go-getters. If we do it, there are other very descriptive terms for it. Yes. But that's how you get things done. The simple thing is don't be a wallflower. If you want something, go out, present it, have the information that you need so that when you talk to someone, you state exactly what the problem is and what your proposed solution is, and any consequences for not doing it, but also how this will fix your problems. You would be surprised that most managers will then go and say, that's really a good idea. If they don't, okay, well then, they could just, be meanie-poos. But I think you'll find that if you're a little more aggressive, you will be able to move on, get what you want, and get noticed.
I think you mentioned in our earlier conversation as well that you also had support from other people on your team, and that came up in our conversation that not all women and not all minorities have had the same experience, which I think is worth noting. Like
yes,
pick you up and put you in a different company, they might have told you, well, what are you doing? So.
They absolutely might, and it could also just be my personality. I'm not a wallflower. As I mentioned, I was a tomboy, so therefore the guys did not coddle me. If we want to skateboard down Park Avenue, New York, we skateboard down Park Avenue. If I fell, well, just get up, brush yourself off, and keep going. So that's the mentality that I've had, just to keep going. But you're absolutely right. There are some environments that are not supportive, and that is hard. But you sometimes either have to find the ally, beat your head against the wall, or move on, because it may not be the right environment.
So Louise, I want to talk a little bit, if you're willing to share this, about, so sometimes in order to find allies, you might need to create your own space or be the drive behind it. Do you want to maybe talk a little bit about why this panel came to be, if you're willing to share?
Yes. So last year I was here at JNUC on the second, and on the second keynote day, a bunch of the women were talking in the women's Slack channel. There were 3 guys up here. They deserve to be up here. They're really great for JAMF. But a comment was made. Look at the lady love. The channel exploded. Not in a bad way, but we're like, okay, you're right. And then there was a flurry of emails and messages. We created a mini event that day. We got a lunch set up. But then I also emailed my HR department. And I emailed her and I said, do we have a women in tech group at CBS? If yes, where is it? If no, can we create it? I sent the email. I moved on. I didn't think anything of it. Well, it was the Wednesday. We all went to the JAMP event. Didn't pay any attention to it. I got back to my room, and soon afterwards, I got a message on my phone. I'm like, okay, cool, whatever. I looked at it. It was from HR. HR said, this is an excellent idea. Please come see me when you get back. Usually when you have HR saying, come see me, it's kind of a terrifying thing. And I can't avoid her. She's 3 doors down from me. But then, I met with her, made an appointment, and I talked, and she said, well, what do you want? I stumbled through it. A few months later, with her help and the Women's Networking Group at CBS, we launched the Women in Tech Group. I also needed a lot of help. I reached out to the Women's Channel going, okay, well, I have a name. What do I do? How do I create this? So I reached out to a few people, and I'm looking at someone directly right now, who helped me, and she put me in touch with someone. So then I was able to go back to HR and say, here's an outline of what we've done. Flash forward several months later, we had our first general meet and greet meeting. The overall consensus was, we've been waiting for this. This is awesome. Where was it? We had heard from offices that I didn't even know existed. We had conference rooms full of women. So, yes, sometimes you have to create your own space and your own allies. It's hard, but again, it's also about not being a wallflower, taking that leap and risk and going forward. I also then, for this panel, the previous year, bugged my rep about it. It's like, hey, do you have this? Do you have this? It's like, that's a great idea. There were a few emails that went back and forth with JAMF, but it was a little late in the game, so it didn't happen. And then earlier this year, I got an email, a reply to the email in 2017 saying, hey, we had the panel. Do you want to be on it? My first reaction was to dive under the desk. I'm like, be careful what you wish for, because you're going to get it. I replied going, I would like to, but I had to get approval from my manager, HR, legal, corporate comm. I'll get back to you. They all said yes. So I'm like, okay. And I eventually replied, said yes. And then, my name appeared. I'm like, oh, wait, I'm here. So that's 2 stories in one.
Awesome, thank you. And thank you for bringing us up here on this stage today. I think this speaks a little bit to, and it could start in a very simple fashion, whether or not you ask it aggressively or just ask it, right? Just asking the questions like, do we have this group? Can we present something? Can we meet? Can we do lunch? Or just start scheduling lunch and saying, I'm going to do this lunch, and we're all going to meet. I had a friend recently get hired at a company, and she asked in her interview and pointed out that their company wasn't super diverse and asked them what their plans were to improve diversity and inclusion in their company, and said if they didn't have a good answer, she would be turning down the position. It's a pretty risky thing to do in an interview, but I think if you want to see change, it's important to start asking those hard questions as soon as you can. That way you can start making some decisions and plans on whether or not that organization is the right fit for you. So I love that. I love that you spoke up, and it snowballed into such a wonderful thing. And what's the worst that's going to happen? Someone's going to say no, and you might get rejected, and you might feel that little bit of failure. But it's so much better than knowing, oh, what if I didn't say anything? So I love that. I have more questions here, but if people in the audience have anything and they're brave enough to come to the front and ask a thing or two, I'd love to hear from you. Hello.
Look, you ask and shall receive. I actually don't have a question, I'm more of a comment. So I've attended at other conferences, similar sessions, and I have to say thank you to all the men, because in the prior 2 sessions, not JAMF, that I have attended, there have never been men who came. So it isn't just a woman's effort.
Thank you. Thank you for that.
I have lots of thoughts, but I'm going to do one, and then we can talk at the networking link later. This is something that I've brought up a few times with people. We sat together at lunch yesterday. Every year there's a big conference called the Grace Hopper Celebration. This year it was in Houston. There were over 20,000 attendees. I think it was probably 80% or more female. So a comment to start is, if you think there's a pipeline problem, there isn't. The question is, did any of the organizations that you represent on the stage attend Grace Hopper? And if you didn't, are you planning on doing so in the future?
I believe the answer is no. For JAMF, we did not. I was looking after our lunch, I was looking at their site last night. And I definitely think it's something that we will talk about and figure out how we can get more involved. The other thing I noticed, and I'll mention this here, is that I said my background was in financial services, so I was looking at the companies that are considered top for female leadership, and there were a lot of financial services companies. And I think maybe that's because it's hard to recruit to financial services. You get an engineering degree, you don't go, I want to go work at insurance. And so some of the people that have non-traditional backgrounds, it's created an opportunity for people to get into leadership and technology and learn their way. And so I started to reflect that maybe that's how I got my opportunity. And really, from my background, half the CIOs I've worked for in the last 20 years have all been women. But it's been in a different industry where they've had different needs and needed to look a little differently at their requirements. So I thought it was a great site, and I certainly am going to see what I can do personally to get more involved in that. So I appreciate you asking it, and I'm sure we'll be taking a look at it with JAMF.
And was part of your question, do you think there's a pipeline problem? Was that?
There isn't one.
Oh, I don't think there is. Right, there's not. And I have 2 comments about that. One is, I think there's a culture problem. There's not a pipeline problem. I've met a lot of women who were looking for jobs as software engineers, and I talked to a lot of candidates, whether I'm hiring or not, and I've met many, many women and young people who are they don't apply for jobs because they don't think they're qualified, because they've been told by other people that, oh, you're not ready for that, or you're not. Whereas men who are totally underqualified will apply. And I think that's a cultural thing that needs to change. And 2, if you're a woman in the Twin Cities, there's a all-female hackathon called Hack the Gap. Has anybody heard of it or attended it? All right. Well, it was started by Kristen Womack and
It's Jenna Peterson.
Jenna Peterson.
Yeah.
Kristen works part-time with my team. It is a weekend hackathon that is only women. We sponsored it, and I asked to just like visit. She's like, well, I know you're a sponsor, but you can't come in. And I was like, that's awesome. I'm like, and for like 24 hours, it is, doors closed, only women allowed inside. And when you see what comes out of that weekend, it's just amazing. And so these women are, and a lot of them are employed as programmers. Some of them are junior and like looking to get in the industry. And the level of talent is incredible. And so, yeah, I agree that there's not a pipeline problem.
I won't commit my company to saying yes on that. That being said, I mean, I've known about it, and based on our conversations at lunch and then offline, I think it would be great if we went to it. And it's something that I have looked at, and is something that is a session that I will bring up with my larger group and see if that's something that we can at least attend, partially for outreach, or mostly for outreach to say, hey, we're here, we want to hire. But again, I cannot commit my company to going.
Hi. After 30 years in software, I found my way in the door, I found my way at the table, and I found myself having the opportunity to speak. But I've had also, perhaps because of my joyful disposition, and people misinterpret joy as a lack of intelligence, or somehow it makes me invisible or silent. But I've experienced many times saying something, and then crickets, and then 2 minutes later, a man says the very same thing, and he's heralded as a hero and a genius. So as an effort to get over that, there were some of us discussing this yesterday, and I'd like to give a shout out to Alice, wherever she might be, because what she did in that moment, she actually silently did this to someone and allowed me to keep speaking with her, just silently with her fingers. I don't know if Alice is here, but she's wonderful. And that was an example to me of something that I can do for someone else. So my question is, do you have a favorite mechanism or phrase that you utilize as a bystander to do bystander intervention on behalf of those who are otherwise invisible and silent?
I don't. I manage all guys, so they just all usually talk over each other. That being said, when they, yes, I'm looking at you. One of my engineers is right here. He's probably hopefully sinking under the chair. But basically what I do is very, very simply, if I hear something, I will say, stop, just very forcefully. Stop it, end the conversation, say, wait, hold on, you finish your statement, or stop, you pick it up. I think your idea and Alice's idea is very great. If there are allies there who hear it, then they should do that.
For those of you who couldn't see, she made a motion that her friend basically told someone to be silent because she was talking, right? And I think, quite simply, that's what you do. There's a lot of men who will just talk over women and also over men, but I usually, if I catch that, I usually just say, she's talking. And that's often enough. It's a very simple thing that doesn't happen enough.
There was a really great article that came out a few years back about a team of women who were in Obama's cabinet, who every time they walked into a room, they made sure to support one another. And so when someone would say something, they would piggyback off and they'd be like, yeah, that's awesome. And so just having just like one other person in the room that looks out for you and can help advocate for you. One thing that I try to do whenever I'm in a room for especially more introverted or more quiet people, where I know they have things that they want to say, but they're probably just feeling uncomfortable speaking up, is I will specifically call and ask them for their opinion too. And so making that time and making that space so that the extroverts in the room don't get all the time and all the ideas and all the attention, that you're specifically calling and giving space for those quieter individuals, because their voice matters just as much as everyone else's.
My question actually piggybacks off of the previous question. Considering our industry has denied women their voice for so long, while I absolutely applaud women who are brave enough to take and make that space available to them, I believe it's incumbent upon us as allies and coworkers to make that space available to them. Do you have advice for us, for the allies and coworkers of women, to make that space for them?
Yeah, I mean, so I would say I'm a big fan in just building relationships with everyone that you work with. And so when anyone new joins the team or the company I'm at, I always do coffee or lunch with them to get to know them on a personal level. And I feel like if you just understand people better on a personal level, it's just way easier to just work with them. And I don't know, I think it's always just asking people, how can I best support you in your role, because it's different for everyone. And then, you know, if you see someone having a tough time, try to step in and help with that. You know, whether or not they want to share it with you or not, but just like helping to advocate for that person, like so-and-so had a really good idea, or I think someone should talk to so-and-so, or I'm gonna go talk to so-and-so and try to figure out how we can help better support them.
So I've got a comment and a question. The comment, I'll go first. In my company, one way that we have tried to increase our levels of female hiring in the tech space is we've just made a very simple requirement within our recruiting that we must interview at least one woman for every position. And I think that that's something that would be easy for a lot of different companies to implement. So if anybody has a line on their hiring manager, give that as a suggestion, because if you don't look for women, you're not going to find any women. But if you're specifically looking for that woman, she might be way more qualified than these 5 guys that you found that are huge resumes, but maybe don't have the tech experience that you're looking for. And then my question is, you've talked a little bit about recruiting women and the hiring requirements, but I'm also wondering what companies can do to make themselves stand out as inclusive, to show women that they are looking to include them, and to prevent women from stepping into a company and realizing like, oh, this is bro city, I don't want any part of this. So what do you think as far as that's concerned?
The first thing I would probably say, excuse me, is outreach. So, as Emily mentioned, Grace Hopper, you have to be out there. That's literally the first thing. On your website, have an updated diversity page. And then when you bring women in, when you're hiring them, have a woman on the panel. Have one there. It's hard sometimes. Within my tower, I'm the only woman. In the larger group, there are a handful of us, so it can't always happen. But if you have a woman on the panel or interviewing, you'll be seen as being a little more friendly. But then the other part is obviously outreach. I don't have a great answer for it, but that would be one of the first steps, to say, hey, we're here, this is what we do, these are some of the resources we have.
And I'll add on that. I think if you are looking, it's really important that you're exploring the culture of where you're going. And if you ask questions, I think I asked it of every person I met with, you start to stitch together, and you might be wrong, sometimes you're wrong, but you get an idea of where you think you're heading into. And if they are talking to you about the programs they have and their commitment, that's something that's meaningful. But you have to ask. I would ask pointed questions on what the culture is, what are their programs, so that you get a view of where they're headed.
I think some of your best advocates are going to be the women that already work for you. You know, obviously, like a lot of companies have recruiting bonuses. If you know, there's a job opening and you introduce somebody to HR and they get hired, you get a bonus. If you have a crazy bro culture and you have a woman that has a lot of tech friends and a job opens up, she's probably not going to tell her friends to apply for the job. But if you do create a good culture, then it sort of basically just self-propagates. You know, a woman has a friend who's a programmer as well. There's a programming position. She says, hey, you should apply for this job. This is a great place to work.
My question piggybacks off the previous one. So my company's committed to having as many diverse candidates as we can have, and within the company, we have my IT team has the same commitment as well, and we have an opening for a help desk person on our team, but the only applicants that we've received were male so far. So previous to today, I didn't realize that a job description could be a form of a blocker. Are there examples or things that you've run into in your experience that were in job descriptions that, you know, turned women off from applying or made them feel like they couldn't apply or shouldn't apply, so that we can like actively review our job description to gain some more candidates?
I can definitely help with you on that. The one thing I think you should avoid is a checklist. So, and being very specific. So, I need to have 5 to 10 years. No. You might want to say someone like, you know, who has, you know, vast experience. Someone who has to have a 400 level JAMP cert. No, you can rephrase it. Someone who's worked specifically in this industry. You don't need that. So if you avoid a checklist style of I want this, 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 as a hiring manager, I know this. It's a wish list. I want all these things, but if I get that, I mean, I've got a unicorn. I'll be happy with 60%. We're all engineers. We can figure it out. We can use the Google, or we can use Slack. So, you know, that's the first thing. But I'll be happy to talk to you offline about some of it. I will have to, you know, look through my old emails, remember some of the stuff. There are plenty of sites that will help you make the job description either more female-friendly or more neutral.
Thank you.
One tactic is to write a job opening, a job post that doesn't list what qualifications you're looking for in a person, but it actually lists the problems that you need help solving. So, you know, like let's say the team's falling behind on all the UI bug fixes. Well, you say, hey, we need someone to come in and fix these kinds of UI bugs. We've got JavaScript bugs, we've got CSS bugs, we've got HTML bugs. And you don't list what you're looking for in a person, you list the problems that need to be solved. And that way somebody who says, well, you know what, I don't really know CSS, but I know I can learn it, and I'm going to get on this job and I'm going to fix those bugs. And that kind of neutralizes like the checklist. I agree completely with that.
Awesome. Thank you guys so much. This is such a good conversation, and hate to cut it short, but it doesn't have to be cut short because we have a refreshment area in the corner, and we hope all of you will join us over there, continue this really great conversation. Inclusion and diversity are so important to JAMF, and this really is just the beginning for us. We hope to do a lot more events like this. Jeff, Louise, Beth, Liz, thank you so much for your time and for being here today.